Hello everyone, and welcome to today's bonus video, where I have compiled some of my favorite stories from the past. I've also re-edited these stories for a better viewing experience, so it'll be like a new video again. If you were originally too afraid to listen to them the first time, then this large horror anthology video might be for you. But before we start, please remember to kick that like button and suplex that subscribe, as it really helps the channel a lot. And without further ado, let's get started. I am a man in my late 30s, and I have several businesses of my own. One of them is an event organizing company. One night, while I was driving back after going to inspect an event venue in another province, a place that I had never been to before, I was exhausted from the entire day. After I had driven back about halfway, I began to feel like I could not keep driving anymore. The road I was on was quite deserted and frightening. There were almost no cars passing at all, and I forced myself to keep driving, hoping that I would eventually come across some kind of rest stop or gas station. But the more that I sped up, the more it seemed like I was moving farther and farther from any community area. The silence from the nighttime atmosphere, together with the cool air from the air conditioner and the exhaustion that had built up throughout the day, made me start to nod off at the wheel. My car began to drift back and forth until the wheels on the left side started slipping toward the edge of the road. But at that moment, it was as if fate was still on my side. Suddenly, I heard the sound of a large motorcycle with a loud exhaust coming from behind me. It sped past the front of my car very quickly. In the darkness, what I saw looked like a female university student riding a big bike past me before disappearing into the dark. That was enough to make me let out a breath of relief. I felt grateful because it had woken me up and kept me from having an accident that could have taken my life. After I became more alert and continued driving for a little while, I noticed lights several kilometers ahead. But the light I saw did not look like they belonged to a gas station or a rest area. They looked more like a checkpoint. When I drove closer, I realized that they were the lights of rescue vehicles helping people at an accident site. What I saw was a trailer truck that had almost finished making a U-turn. At the rear of the trailer, a large motorcycle and one rescue vehicle had crashed and become crushed together. Nearby was the body of the person who had died, lying on the ground with a white cloth covering it. Because of the accident, the road was only open for one lane. I slowly drove past, following the rescue workers' directions. But as I was about to pass the accident scene, one of the rescue workers waved my car down. He seemed to be asking for some kind of help. Since that area did not seem dangerous and there were many rescue workers around, I stopped the car and rolled down the window. When I asked what was going on, I understood that the rescue team wanted me to help take one girl somewhere. When I looked carefully, I saw a female university student. She had clean white skin and a pretty face, and she looked like she came from a well-off family. But the strange thing was that her clothes were extremely dirty and messy. I did not refuse and did not ask too many questions. Since I was already driving anyways, I thought it would be good to have someone travel with me. Because the front passenger seat was full of equipment that I used for work, I told the girl to sit in the back seat. But something strange happened when she got into the car. I felt the car sink heavily, as if something with a great amount of weight had climbed inside. A single young woman should have not have weighed that much, but before she closed the door, a rotten stench so foul it made me want to vomit drifted into my car. I had to quickly roll down the windows. After I drove away for a short while, the atmosphere inside the car became increasingly suffocating. I tried making conversation with her, but she only answered briefly, one question at a time. She kept sitting with her head lowered, muttering to herself, "I want to go home. I want to go home." Why can't I go home already? I began to feel that something was strange. Then, out of nowhere, the girl asked, "Brother, where did my boyfriend's bike go?" The question came suddenly, with no beginning or explanation, and it made me feel uneasy. When I looked back through the rearview mirror, the sight I saw nearly shocked me to death. The university student lifted her face, and blood was flowing in a long stream from her neck. Then she collapsed and her head broke off and fell onto the back seat. I slammed on the brakes so hard that the tires dragged along the road, then turned around to look. But there was nothing strange there. The girl was still sitting quietly, her face pale. I thought I must have been too tired and had seen a hallucination. I apologized to the girl and continued driving. When we were almost at the town, the girl told me to turn into an alley behind the temple. She said that if we went in only a little farther, we would reach her house. The moment I turned into the alley, the car began acting strangely, as if someone outside was shaking it. The girl then said, "Brother, why are there so many people outside?" But what I saw out the window was nothing. There was not a single person, only darkness covering everything. As I drove deeper and deeper inside, the road became more narrow until both sides of it were filled with rice fields. I had to slow down more and more when suddenly the girl spoke again. "Brother, I don't know who they are, but so many people are following us." That frightened me badly. Even when I looked into the rearview mirror, there was not a single person following us. But what I did see was that blood kept seeping from the girl's neck. In the end, I had to fold the rearview mirror down so I would not see it anymore. Eventually, I began to see lights again. They were blue, green, and red neon lights decorated alongside the road for about 1 kilometer before reaching the house. The house looked like it belonged to a wealthy family. As soon as the university student saw it, she said, "Brother, this is my house. What kind of event is my family holding?" After she finished speaking, before I could even turn around to look, in the blink of an eye, she was already out of the car. I did not even hear the car door open or close at all. It was already very late. Even though there was an event going on and the house was decorated with lights all over, there were no guests or attendees left. From the sounds I could hear, there may have been only a gambling circle inside. Suddenly, all the decorative lights shining throughout the alley went out all at once. Not a single one remained. Even my car's headlight went out as well. For about 30 seconds, I was trapped in complete darkness in an unfamiliar place surrounded by rice fields. Then I heard screams and chaotic shouting coming from inside the house, as if some kind of commotion had broken out. After that, I heard about 3 or 4 people running out from inside the house. They started motorcycles and immediately rode away. Then the lights came back on again. As I was about to reverse the car and leave, I turned around to look behind me and saw a necklace lying on the back seat. I guess it was the girl's necklace and that it had fallen there. When I picked it up and looked at it, I immediately knew that it had to be expensive, so I decided to get out of the car and walk over to ring the doorbell at that house. After the sound of the bell ended, an older-looking woman poked her face out from a second-floor window. Then she came downstairs to meet me. The moment the woman saw me, she immediately began crying. "Did you bring my daughter home, son? Thank you so much." She took my arm and pulled me inside to sit and rest and drink some water. Confused, I followed the mother into the house and sat down at a marble table while drinking the water that she had prepared for me. After things calmed down, I handed the necklace the girl had left behind back to her mother. The moment her mother received the necklace, tears flowed again. She held the necklace tightly against herself before inviting me upstairs to the second floor. When we reached the upper floor, before we entered the hall, the girl's mother held my wrist tightly and said, "Don't be afraid, son." The moment I walked inside, the smell of incense and candles filled the air. What I saw was a large coffin, a refrigerated coffin, set up in the middle of the house. Then I slowly turned to look at the photograph in front of the coffin. It was a picture of the girl that I had just picked up. My knees went weak and I almost collapsed. The mother and the relatives had come to help support me. After I managed to regain my senses and paid my respects to the body, the girl's relatives and mother came to sit together and talk with me. She told me that the girl had died 7 days earlier. That night was the 7th night of the funeral, and that the body was going to be cremated the next day. The cause of her death was that she had been returning home from the university. She had borrowed her boyfriend's big bike to ride home, but then she lost contact. Her mother later received a phone call from the police saying that the girl had been in an accident. She had crashed into a trailer truck that was making a U-turn. It was believed that she had been riding fast and had not seen it. Then, a rescue vehicle that had happened to be following behind struck her again, causing her head to be severed. In that accident, besides the girl, several workers died as well. Throughout the funeral, every night when her mother slept, she dreamt that the girl was trapped at that spot and could not find her way home. Even after inviting a monk to perform a ritual, it still did not work. But just a moment earlier, her mother had suddenly heard the girl's voice calling. The girl said, "I'm home now. Someone brought me back. I missed you so much, Mother." The girl did not know what had happened to her. Everyone who had been sitting there heard the voice too, and they all scattered in different directions, leaving only close relatives behind. Her mother believed that the girl probably still did not realize that she was already dead. As for the necklace, it was the necklace that the girl's father had given to her before he passed away many years earlier. The girl loved and cherished it very much. It must have been her intention to make it come with my car so that the necklace could return to her mother. After learning the full truth, I decided to stay there overnight and remain for the cremation the next day. After the funeral rites were completed, while I was driving back, I was still wondering about everything that had happened. So I turned the car around and went back along the same road to the place where I had picked up the girl. When I arrived, there were no traces of the accident left. It was probably true that the accident had happened several days earlier. What I had seen must have been the girl's final consciousness, still trying to return home to her mother. It must have connected with my own weakened mind at the time when I was also about to have an accident. That caused me to see certain images, and in the end, I considered myself lucky because that same thing had helped saved my life as well. This is a story about something strange that happened to me, something I had the chance to encounter myself and still cannot find an answer for, even to this day. The story goes back to when I was only around 6 or 7 years old. My family mainly made a living by farming rice. There were 6 people living together: my father, mother, my older brother, my younger sister, my grandmother, and me. My grandparents only had one son, my father, so almost all 10 acres of land belonged to him alone. But there was one thing I didn't understand back then. My grandmother would always say that we were allowed to farm only to 9 acres. The innermost area, where there was about a large square pond about half an acre in size, was absolutely forbidden. We were not allowed to go near it, and if we ever went around that area, we had to come back before sunset every time. Back in those days, when people went to work in the rice fields, they would often ask for help from others. Neighbors in the village would come to help one another regularly. On the day that the incident happened, while all the adults were working out in the rice fields, the children gathered and played together at the hut at the far end of the field. At the time, there were probably almost 10 of us. Since there was nothing to do, one friend suggested that we play hide and seek. After someone started counting, the rest of us children ran off in different directions. Because the rice fields were wide and open, everyone tried to run as far away as possible so that they would not be found. I also ran deep into the farthest field, a place I had never entered before. To explain the area briefly, the smaller fields were normal square plots where you could see far into the distance, but the fields farther inside were quite overgrown and complicated, with only a small path that led into the pond inside. While I was hiding there, some time had passed. Then my older brother ran in the same direction. I called out to him and told him to hide with me. Because the two of us had gone in too deeply, no one could find us. My older brother started feeling playful and went down to search for snails, crabs, and fish, thinking that maybe we could bring something back home and make our parents happy. Time passed and the air began to grow cooler. The sky also started getting dark. The two of us thought that it was probably time to go back, but at that time, something made both of us freeze and stop completely still. Something appeared on the opposite side of the pond. It looked like a glowing light, a round ball of orange light floating back and forth in a way that gave me goosebumps. No matter how I looked at it, it absolutely did not seem like a person. While the two of us were stunned, the light stopped still, as if it were thinking about something. Then it changed directions. Instead of moving left and right, it began floating along the edge of the dirt road around the pond. Judging by its direction, if we did not hide, that glowing light would definitely float right up to where we were. My older brother was already around 13 or 14 years old enough to begin understanding what it was. He quickly threw all the snails, crabs, and fish he had caught onto the ground, hurried out of the water immediately, and grabbed my hands while I stood, trembling with fear. But because he thought that if we ran far out into the open, we might be seen, the two of us hid behind the next dirt ridge instead. What I saw was the glowing light floating closer and closer, slowly. In the end, the light stopped behind the pile of crabs, fish, and snails that my older brother had thrown away. The atmosphere at that moment was completely silent. There was not even the slightest sound. Even breathing felt as if it might be heard by that thing. But suddenly, the sound of dogs howling rang out. I had no idea which direction the sound had came from, and at the same time, the glowing light began flickering on and off, making the scene so horrifying that I almost lost my mind. The glowing light I saw had no head and no intestines. Its shape looked more like a hand clutching a pig's heart. It was about the size of a football. Not long after that, something made my hair stand up again. Another glowing light appeared. This second light moved much faster than the first one and came to stop near it. At the same time, the sounds of dogs howling grew many times louder. By then, I could barely take it anymore. Luckily, my older brother still had his senses. He hugged me as tightly as he could. After the two glowing lights met each other, they changed from staying still to floating back and forth as if they were playing together. It looked as if they were eating the snails and crabs and fish that my older brother had left behind. There was also a horrifying sound, like something moving through the air, which made our skin crawl terribly. The whole thing went on for about 20 minutes. Then suddenly, we heard the voices of my father and the villagers who came looking for us. The sound made the noises from the two glowing lights go quiet. My older brother decided that whatever happened would happen. If we lived, we lived, and if we died, we died. He closed his eyes, covered me, and ran toward the sound of our father's voice. The moment we ran out, not even a second passed before a bright flash of light and a sharp, piercing sound swept quickly back and forth behind us. The lights shot up toward as high as the tops of the coconut trees. I could only cry, completely losing my senses, while my older brother almost could not move his legs. The two balls of fire flew back and forth until they nearly grazed our ears. Sometimes they flew high, sometimes low, as if they were trying to take our lives. Then, luck finally sided with us. A gunshot rang out. The shot came from the village headman, who had fired his gun into the sky. The two glowing lights disappeared, and my father then rushed in and held the both of us tightly. The villagers who had followed him were all shocked. Some were holding guns, while others carried torches. Some of them stood around me and my older brother, while another group forced themselves to go with the village headman and walk all the way to the other side of the pond. About 20 minutes later, the village headman and the villagers came back carrying the remains of the snails, crabs, and fish, which had been bitten and eaten until they were mangled. There were deep greenish marks, as if wild animals had chewed them up and eaten them for fun. There was a rotten smell and terrifying stains of blood. That night, my older brother and I were ordered to sleep in the prayer room. Some villagers stayed over and sat talking with my father until morning. The next day, the two of us had to undergo a ritual with holy water to remove bad luck, while also listening to my grandmother scold us because she had already warned us never to go in there under any circumstances. When I asked my grandmother what those things were, the answer I got was that she did not know either. In the past, my late grandfather had once been friends with a couple who owned the land next to the pond. They were quite close and visited one another often. But about 1 month before my grandfather passed away, he strictly ordered everyone never to go into that area again and to stop having to do anything with the two couples completely. When my grandmother asked him why, he refused to tell her. About 3 years passed, and we all thought that there was nothing more to it. Then, one night, while I was sleeping around 2 or 3 in the morning, I heard a strange, sharp, piercing sound, as if something were flying back and forth around our house. I quickly came out from under my mosquito net and looked towards the eaves of the wooden house. In the old days, houses often had ventilation gaps where you could see outside. What I saw were 2 glowing balls of fire floating back and forth. They were flying around outside the house. The memory from 3 years earlier came back to haunt me again. Everyone in the house ran and gathered inside my room. Because of the incident 3 years before, my father had been cautious. He had decided to buy a homemade gun, a break-action shotgun, along with consecrated bullets that the village headman had given him. After the 2 glowing lights floated back and forth in a horrifying way, one of them suddenly rammed into the window. It seemed as if it intended to break the window and force its way inside. In our panic, only my grandmother and father remained calm. My father aimed the gun at the window with no other choice. "Shoot it!" my grandmother shouted. Then my father's gun went off in a thunderous roar. The bullets pierced through the window, leaving so many holes that they could not be counted. At the same time, it sounded like a wild animal was being slaughtered, and it rang throughout the whole village. While the other glowing light swooped back and forth above the roof, the light became so bright that it could be seen shining through the old zinc roofing sheets. Another gunshot rang out, piercing through the roof, followed by a terrible wailing sound mixed with a woman's scream. Then everything, finally, grew quiet. Not long after that, the villagers and village headmen arrived because they had heard the two loud gunshots. Everyone sat together, talked, and kept watch until morning. As soon as the sun rose, the sound of the assistant village headman's motorcycle came and stopped in front of my house. "Headman! Headman! The two couples on the other side of the lake are dead. Their son just sent word. Out of nowhere, both of them screamed and writhed for about 3 minutes, then just died." After that incident, my father entered the temple, shaved his head, and ordained as a monk for about 4,000 days. As for my older brother, he became paranoid and easily startled. He could not sleep well, and he remained that way to this day. As for everything that happened, I still do not know how to summarize it. What exactly was the thing that we saw? Was it a pikrasu? And if it was, why did it have no head and no intestines? Why was it just a glowing ball of light shaped like a large pig's heart? And why did it follow us all the way home, even though 3 years had already passed since the first incident? Why did the couple die on the same day? Were those events connected? And what was the secret that my grandfather never told anyone? This happened sometime around the year 2000. Back then, it was considered the golden age for repair and maintenance technicians because of the period of transition from analog to digital. My name is Barry. I'm a boy from the provinces. I had left my hometown in the Isan region to continue my studies at a vocational institute. Because I was a determined student, hardworking, diligent, and decent-looking, I eventually met my girlfriend, Nora, who studied at the same institute. Nora was the daughter of the owner of an electrical appliance repair shop in the city. Since she was not very good at studying, I volunteered to tutor her until her grades had improved. Because of that, I became loved and favored by her mother and family. After I finished my vocational certificate, I did not have the money to continue studying at the university. I had planned to go back and settle down at my home in the provinces, but because I was a good kid, Nora's father offered to take care of my education expenses and let me move in with them. After moving into Nora's house, I also became the regular repairman at her father's shop. The shop began to gain more of a reputation, and we started taking repair jobs outside the shop as well. Then, one day, Nora's father told me that an old customer he knew wanted us to go install an air conditioner for him. When I arrived there with one helper, the house I saw was a 4-story commercial building. The outside looked run down and disgusting. There were water stains, algae stains, and smoke marks stuck all over the concrete walls. Looking at the things outside, there were gas tanks, equipment, and many cooking utensils, so I guessed that the place might have once been a made-to-order restaurant. Since the metal door of the building was closed, I called the 02 landline number that was posted on the glass cabinet beside the gas tank. "Hello, dear, you can lift the door and come in," the voice on the other end said immediately. The voice on the phone was not very clear, but I could guess that the person on the other end was an elderly woman, probably around 60 to 70 years old. But before I could even answer, the door was suddenly lifted up with a loud, clattering sound. It startled both me and my helper, and at the same time, the phone call cut off. In front of us was an old uncle. From his appearance and manner, he looked dazed and distant, as if he was not very friendly. The moment I walked into the house, I had to hold my breath because it had an extremely foul smell that hit my nose hard. But because I was a professional and didn't want Nora's father to lose face, I forced myself to keep going and continued the job. "Which floor is it, Uncle?" I asked in a friendly way, as I would with any customer. "Fourth floor, the innermost room," the old uncle answered in a cold, chilling voice. My helper and I asked for permission to go up and look at the room first so that we could prepare the right equipment and finish before it got dark. "Close the door too," the old uncle said. His words made both my helper and I feel extremely uneasy. My helper and I walked past the second and third floors, both of which were completely dark. This gave me goosebumps, but because I was being considerate, I did not turn on any lights. When we reached the fourth floor, we came to the innermost room, which I assumed was the room that the old uncle had mentioned. The light was already on, so my helper and I walked inside. The room was very clean. There was a clean-looking bed, and the wardrobe was neat and orderly. It was completely different from downstairs, which smelled musty and filthy. On top of that, the room had a pleasant fragrance, something like Chinese medicine, though at times it also seemed like the scent of Thai-scented water. It filled the air and made me miss my mother and grandmother back home. "You're already here, child," a voice from the doorway made both my helper and I jump so hard that our hearts nearly dropped. When I turned around, I saw an old auntie standing there. She looked kind and gentle. She smiled at how startled we both were. "This is the room, child. You can install it over there beside the wardrobe." Her warm voice, along with her smile, made the both of us feel more at ease. My helper and I went back down to the first floor to carry the air conditioner and the equipment upstairs. When we reached the first floor, I noticed a freezer about waist high. It looked like an ordinary freezer used in restaurants. It was placed close against the wall, plugged in securely. I figured that they were probably using it to store leftover ingredients that had not sold. But the strange was, why had I not seen this freezer at first? The moment I walked past it, the musty smell I had smelled earlier came back and hit both my nose and my helper's nose again. It was a very strong and foul odor. The two of us looked at each other and immediately understood that whatever was inside that freezer was probably beginning to rot. "Oh, I know where this is going." While I was still unloading things from the truck, my helper nudged me and asked me in a strange tone, "Brother, where did that old uncle go?" "I don't know either. It's better if he's just not around. It makes us work easier," I told him. I brushed it off so that my helper would feel better, even though deep down, I was also quite suspicious. Around that time, some local people passed by and looked at us strangely. "Don't pay any attention to them," I told my helper. The two of us then carried all the things that we needed up towards the fourth floor. When we were nearly there, I told my helper to prepare and arrange the work area for installing the air conditioner. I then went back down to the ground floor and began so that it would not block the road. As I was walking back up to the fourth floor, when I passed the third floor, I heard a strange sound, as if someone was walking inside one of the rooms with the door closed. The sound made me stop in place and stare at one black wooden door. Suddenly, something happened that startled me. the light inside the room turned on, and the orange light slipped out from the gap underneath the door. I gathered myself, clenched my teeth, and went back upstairs to continue working. What I saw next startled me again. My helper was curled up on the auntie's bed. He looked strange, sweat pouring all over his face and body, his shirt soaked through. He kept muttering, "Hot, it's so hot, it's so hot." I was afraid that the auntie would scold us, and I was shocked by what I was seeing, so I grabbed his arm and yanked him up from the bed with force. The moment he got up, his condition was like someone who had just been woken up from sleep. It was as if he could not remember what had happened. I told him to hurry up and finish the job. By then, it was already a little bit past 3 in the afternoon. The two of us hurried to work, barely speaking to each other. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw the auntie standing at the doorway, smiling. She was holding a tray with snacks, steamed cupcakes, red syrup drinks, and a boiled pig's head arranged together. The auntie walked in and placed it down for the two of us. "If you're hungry, you can eat first, children." Even though we had already encountered several strange things in that house, having the homeowner there made us feel a little bit more at ease. The two of us began to relax and talked with the auntie while she sat watching us on the bed. As to not reject her kindness, my helper and I ate just a little bit of the snacks that she had brought. Even with how we felt at the time, despite them being ordinary snacks, they somehow tasted incredibly delicious. Maybe it was because we had not eaten lunch yet. We were probably so hungry that the two of us ended up eating almost everything without realizing it. After that, the two of us continued working until the job was completed. I told my helper to hurry up and gather the tools and equipment and take them down to the lower floor, then bring the truck closer so that we could load everything together. Meanwhile, I stayed behind to test the air conditioner. "Is it cool enough, Auntie?" I asked the customer out of habit. But when I turned around, I found that I was alone in the room. Since the air conditioner did not seem to have any problems, I quickly turned it off and went around the 4th floor looking for the auntie so that I could hand her the bill and collect the payment. But every room on the 4th floor had its lights turned off. As I walked down to the 3rd floor, I suddenly remembered that there had been one room with its lights on. I thought that perhaps she was in that room. When I reached the 3rd floor, the light in that room really was on. I tried calling out, "Auntie, Auntie, it's me. The air conditioner is completed, it's finished." But there was no response from the auntie at all. At that moment, I heard the sounds of tools falling from the lower floor, and the light in the room suddenly turned off. Startled, I ran down to the 1st floor immediately. The sight I saw was screwdrivers, drills, and all kinds of tools scattered all throughout the floor. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted at my helper, who happened to be backing up the truck right then. "What do you mean, brother? I put them on top of the freezer just now," my helper answered, which only made me more confused. By then, it was already a little after 6 in the evening, and the sky was starting to get dark. The two of us hurried to gather everything and load it back into the truck. "Brother Barry, do we have to close the door for Auntie?" my helper asked. "Yeah, close it. The old uncle told us to," I answered him. When I mentioned what the old uncle had told us, my helper went pale. "What uncle, brother? I don't think he's real," he said, starting to tremble with fear. Yeah, I don't know. Let's just go," I replied as I started the truck and drove away from that place immediately. The next day, I went to work at the shop as usual. When I saw Nora's father, I told him that I had not collected the money from the customer at that house. It's fine. Today they called and asked us to go help move something up to the 4th floor," Nora's father told me again. That made me sigh deeply, because it meant that I had to go back to that house again. Pa, how many people live in that house? I asked her father because I was suspicious about the old uncle. Right now, I think only one person lives there. I think one of them had already passed away. I heard the one left behind is stubborn and refuses to move in with their child. Actually, I talked to their child, not to them directly, Nora's father answered. His answer made me stop wondering whether the old uncle I had met really existed or not. Even though I was still scared and had goosebumps, I also started feeling deep sympathy for the auntie. As soon as we arrived, I called the same number again, but before anyone could answer, the door was lifted up with a loud crash. This time, the sight in front of us showed no one standing there at all. There was only the musty smell, which had changed into the stench of rot. It stabbed sharply into my nose, so strong that the both of us almost vomited. I patted my helper's shoulder and forced myself to walk into the house so that we could get the job over with. "Move the freezer up to the 4th floor for me, children," the auntie's voice rang down from upstairs, making both my helper and I flinch slightly. "Are you talking about this white freezer, ma'am? The two of us probably can't lift it. We'd need at least 4 people. Give me a second while I call more workers first," I answered the auntie while shouting up toward the upper floor. "Brother Barry, I think it smells really bad. The smell is coming from this freezer. It stinks way too much. Do you think there's something inside?" my helper whispered to me, trembling. Probably rotten pork. Forget about it. Just don't worry about it," I replied to him. Then the auntie's voice came down from upstairs, and this time it sounded like she was starting to get angry. "Are you two going to keep me talking much longer? Bring it up already. It's not heavy. I will help you." "What should we do, brother?" my helper asked. "Yeah, let's try lifting it up first. If we can, then we can do it, but if we can't, then we just can't. That way we can hurry up and leave," I said. The two of us then planned it out how we were going to lift up this freezer. When I examined the freezer carefully, I saw that it was an old model, probably more than 10 years old. Its surface was covered with a nasty rust until it looked like it should not even be usable anymore. The rubber seal around the lid did not look very tight either, but what was strange was that the lid had a chain locked around it with a huge padlock, the kind that no thief would be able to open easily. The two of us cleared the area, unplugged it, and tried to push it out into the middle. It was clear that the freezer was so heavy that just the two of us would never be able to carry it upstairs. But the moment that thought ended, my helper and I suddenly realized that the two of us had already lifted the freezer. We really actually lifted it. The lid of the freezer was at about head level, and the rotten stench hit my nose so hard that I nearly vomited. You walk forward, or I'll be the one lifting this from behind." I tried to use whatever presence of mind I had left to give instructions to my helper. Because it was an old freezer, it was extremely heavy, yet we were somehow carrying it with just 2 people. On top of that, the nauseating smell kept coming out constantly. My helper, who had to walk in front, was shaking with fear. At that moment, we reached the 3rd floor and were about to go up to the 4th. "Should we call the police, brother?" my helper said. The instant his voice ended, something horrifying and hair-raising happened again. A strange sound came from inside the freezer, and the weight suddenly increased enormously until we could no longer control it. My helper, who had already lost his nerve, let go and ran upstairs. The freezer fell. Luckily, we were only on about the 3rd stair, so I only fell down and the freezer did not crush me. But the thing that gave me goosebumps and made me vomit was that the lid of the freezer had opened slightly and a swollen human leg had slipped out. Blood, pus, and a rotten, nauseating smell spilled onto me while I was losing my mind. I forced myself to run upstairs to find my helper and bring him back down. But what I saw was the same before. My helper was lying on the auntie's bed, curled up, crying, trembling, and drenched in sweat. At that moment, I told myself that I no longer cared about anything. I grabbed my helper and dragged him down to the ground floor. Whether he got scraped up or injured, I did not care anymore. As we passed that horrifying freezer, a strange voice came from inside of it. "Hot, I'm hot, help me." I no longer paid any attention to it. When we reached the first floor, the thing I saw nearly drove me insane. The metal door at the front of the house was closed. Not only that, the door had been locked with a padlock from the inside. "Hey, how the hell did we get in?" I shouted at my helper. I tried to pull myself together and called Nora's father, telling him to come here as fast as possible. Pa, something terrible happened. Bring the police too. Pa, please come help us." The two of us sat there, losing our minds in the dark, shouting, Auntie, please open the door for us. We can't take this anymore. We're scared, Auntie. Did you keep the old uncle in the freezer?" But there was no answer at all. There was only the strange sound coming from the freezer. Because the house was not very far from Nora's father's shop, Nora's father arrived quickly. In our panic, my helper and I knocked on the door, begging him to open it as fast as possible. Luckily, my truck had metal cutting tools in it, so Nora's father was able to slide the tool under the door and cut the padlock. When the two of us finally got out, we were feverish and shaking. Not long after that, the police arrived with the son of the homeowner, and everyone went upstairs to inspect the scene. We found the body of an elderly woman in the freezer. The body is swollen. It is estimated that she has been dead for about a month. The police officer's voice reported from upstairs. The homeowner's son came down from upstairs with the color drained from his face. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you," he said. "My mother passed away about a month ago. Normally, we kept her in a refrigerated coffin on the 3rd floor because we planned to keep her for 100 days. My father still couldn't accept it. But about 2 weeks ago, my father called and told me the refrigerated coffin had broken. I didn't have money to buy a new one, so I told my father he had to accept it and take my mother to perform the religious rites. But the next day, my father called me and said that there was no problem anymore and that it was working again." The homeowner's son told us all through tears, devastated when he saw the condition of his own mother, who had been kept inside a freezer instead of a refrigerated coffin. "Then, who was the person who you said was living in this house alone?" Nora's father asked the homeowner's son. "My father," he answered. "He must have gone outside. He called me just this morning and told me to find someone to help move something." His answer made me really confused, but also slightly relieved, because at least the old uncle I had seen at first really existed. It turned out that the auntie was the one that no longer had a physical body and had been sealed inside the freezer. Control. Additional report. We found the body of an elderly man around the same age. He appears to have hung himself in the room on the 3rd floor beside the refrigerated coffin. Judging from the condition of the body, he likely died about 2 weeks ago. They were probably husband and wife. Request one more rescue vehicle. The police officer's voice reported from upstairs again. This time, it was the homeowner's son who collapsed to the floor, sobbing loudly and losing his senses, just like me and my helper had. Yes, the old uncle and auntie had both already died before that, and that is still the question that has remained stuck in my mind to this day. If the door had been locked from the inside by the old uncle, who was believed to have died 2 weeks earlier, in addition, how did the equipment, the tools, and even me and my helper get inside to work there for the 2 whole days? And what about the food that the auntie brought for us to eat? What exactly was that? I guess we'll never know. The kind of occupation that often comes with strange experiences is probably one that requires working at night. My name is Thong Chai. I was in my early 20s and I had just started working as a 10-wheel truck driver, transporting agricultural produce. Personally, I was the type of person who did not believe in ghosts or anything supernatural at all. Because I was new and the youngest among my coworkers, I was often assigned to the closer jobs. Normally, I drove with a senior driver in his 50s named Mai. Mai was one of the most experienced drivers, and he would always teach me how I should drive and which routes I should take. One day, Mai and I were assigned to a job that delivered goods to a province in the Isan region. The moment Mai saw the job order, his face immediately turned pale. I had thought that it was because he had not been feeling well and was probably tired, so I volunteered to take the first turn driving out of Nakhon Pathom so that Mai could rest. Besides, I was still strong and could comfortably drive alone. We had made an arrangement where we would switch drivers at a certain gas station before entering the Isan region. We absolutely had to stop and switch there. He told me I must not drive into that route by myself under any circumstances. I agreed to it properly, and time passed, and when we were getting close to the gas station we agreed on, Mai was still sleeping soundly. Normally, he was a very cheerful, talkative, and always joking around kind of person along the whole way, but I understood that perhaps he had just been feeling tired that day. Since I still felt fine, I continued to drive on my own without paying attention to Mai's warning from earlier. The moment I passed the gas station, the atmosphere along the roadside, which had previously been lit up all the way, suddenly changed into tall trees, as if we had entered a completely different world. I didn't think much about it. Since my truck was a 10-wheeler, my seat was roughly level with the top of the trees. The strange thing about that road was that the tree branches stretched out over the road as if no vehicles had ever passed through before. Because I wasn't careful in time, my truck struck a tree branch on the left side of the road with a loud crash. My side mirror was bent out of shape until it reflected back towards my own truck. Mai had always taught me that if I had ever encountered anything suspicious or unnatural, I must never stop the truck. If I had to stop, the only place I could stop was somewhere with light. So I carefully kept the truck going. Then I began to feel that the 2-lane road was being squeezed tighter and tighter by the branches on both sides until the road became narrower and narrower. Eventually, I had to drive between the left and right lanes right in the middle of the road just to keep the truck moving without hitting the branches that were reaching in. But even then, the branches scraped against both sides of the truck the whole way. I started trying to find an explanation for what was happening. Then I suddenly realized something. With all of this loud noise, how come Mai had still not woken up? I tried shouting to wake him up. Mai, are we lost? But there was no response at all. I glanced over at him, and the sight I saw nearly made me lose my mind. Mai's face was completely black, as if he had been burned by fire. His eyes were wide open, showing only the whites, with no black pupils at all. I was confused and wondered if my eyes were playing tricks on me. Then I looked toward the left side mirror that had been folded in toward the truck, and I almost could not believe what I saw. What I saw was a black figure, something like a shadow, sitting on the left side of Pimai. Its right arm was wrapped around his neck, as if the two of them had been friends before. I was so terrified that I swung my hand and shoved Pimai, who was sitting beside me, with all of my strength while screaming loudly in a voice that was not even recognizable as words. Pimai seemed to regain consciousness and snapped out of whatever trance he was in. His face returned to normal, and he tried to calm me down and make me regain some senses. "Calm down, Tongchai, calm down," he said. At that very moment, the trees on both sides of the road that had been scraping against my truck suddenly disappeared, as if nothing ever happened. After I began to regain my senses, confusion replaced my fear. I tried asking Pimai about what had happened, but he only said, "Let's leave it for now. We'll talk about it in the morning." His words only made me more suspicious. My heart was pounding wildly, and my hands were trembling like I had chills. I asked him to switch places with me and drive instead, but Pimai said, "How are we supposed to stop right now? At this point, you absolutely cannot stop. Just hold yourself together and keep driving first." So I listened to him and continued driving. Pimai just continued to look outside the windows and scouted the area. The two of us fell into a deep silence. After a long while, an incident that seemed like it should have ended did not end at all. I noticed something behind us through the right side mirror. It looked like a round light floating at the height of the truck, chasing after us. I sped up. Pimai noticed how frightened I was and asked, "It's coming again, isn't it?" I could only nod as tears started running down my face. I began to understand why he had told me not to stop under any circumstances, and why he had told me not to drive on this route by myself. "Don't worry, it's following the road. It's not following you," Pimai said, trying to make me feel better. But that didn't help me at all. It only made me more confused and even more terrified. The light chasing us seemed to be getting closer and closer, but luck still seemed to be on my side. Not too far ahead, I saw some lights which told me that we were finally about to enter the city area. I sped toward the lights until, at last, the light following us disappeared. By then, it was almost 6 in the morning. Pimai told me to stop in front of a restaurant. The two of us looked at each other with relief. I was dazed and confused by everything that had happened, while Pimai blew air out of his mouth and sighed. Then he said, "When will he finally forgive me?" Pimai and I got down and ordered food. It seemed like Pimai and the owner of the restaurant knew each other very well. The owner did not seem to move very smoothly. Looking at his left side, he seemed disabled, which made it inconvenient for him to pick up or hold things. I still miss Kem. It's been so many years already, but I still haven't stopped feeling guilty. "So, how is this boys of yours?" the owner asked Pimai in a friendly way. "He's alright. He's hardworking and diligent, but he's a little stubborn and doesn't listen much. See, he ended up getting welcomed by the spirits after all," Pimai answered with a laugh. At that moment, I was extremely confused and desperate to know what had happened. By then, the sky had already begun to brighten. "Do you want to hear it?" Pimai asked me. I nodded. The owner and Pimai then told me the whole story. It turned out that about 20 years earlier, the owner himself had also once worked as a truck driver there. Back then, he was the one who looked after Pimai. Then, a new worker named Pikem came to work with them. But at the time, there were not enough truck drivers to properly train him, so Pikem asked to learn the job without receiving a salary. The company then allowed Pikem to learn the job with Pimai and the owner. Since that road did not have much traffic, the two of them let Pikem drive the whole way. Everything seemed normal at first. But because Pikem did not have enough experience, when he drove to the gas station where Pimai had told me we were supposed to switch drivers, something unexpected happened. A fuel truck suddenly pulled out from the gas station and cut in front of them at full force. Because he had no experience, even though he slammed on the brakes as hard as he could, the weight of the truck meant that its remaining momentum carried him straight into the back of the fuel truck. Pikem was not severely injured at first, but the crash was enough to trap his body against the steering wheel. As for the owner and Pimai, they were not badly injured. The owner had been wearing his seatbelt, while Pimai had only hit his head slightly. The two of them tried to pull Pikem's body out of the truck, but they could not do it. At that time, Pikem was fully conscious. He could only keep saying, "Help me, please help me, don't leave me." Because the vehicle in front was a fuel truck, even though it had just finished unloading fuel at the gas station, the remaining fuel was still enough to cause an unexpected disaster. With only a few moments left, flames quickly engulfed the front of the truck. Even then, the owner still tried to pull Pikem out, but Pimai made the decision to give up. He pulled the owner out of the truck, leaving Pikem's body to be swallowed by the flames. Even the owner's own hand was burnt by the fire. In the end, Pikem died amidst grief and horror in front of the people who had tried to help him and the many onlookers that had gathered around. As for the owner, he lost 4 fingers on his left hand and also lost his career as a truck driver forever. That was the incident that the owner and Pimai could never forget for the rest of their lives. As for me, I eventually quit my job as a truck driver because I still could not come to terms with what had happened. Sometime later, I learned that Pimai himself recently died in an accident involving a 10-wheel truck fire as well. This story happened inside the storyteller's own family, and even though it begins with something very ordinary, the kind of thing that many families go through when an elderly parent gets sick, it slowly turns into something much stranger. Something that was not just about illnesses, not about old age, and not just about death. You see, the storyteller, let's call him Tom, grew up in a family of 5. There was his father, his mother, his younger brother, and his grandmother, including Tom himself. His grandmother was already over 80 years old, and like many people at that age, she had a lot of health problems. She was weak, she had chronic illnesses, and she needed help with a lot of things. But there was one person in the family that she was especially close to, Tom's younger brother. The two of them were extremely attached to each other. They had that kind of grandparent and grandchild relationship where they did not need to say much. Everybody in that house could see it, and this bond that they have would become very important later. Very important. Tom's family had 2 houses built right next to each other. The first house belonged to his grandmother. The second was a newer house that Tom's father had recently built. Eventually, the whole family moved into this new house, the one that Tom's dad built. Everybody except good old Grandma. She refused to leave her old house. Now, at first, that did not seem too unusual. elderly people can be attached to their own space. They know where everything is, they feel comfortable there. So instead of forcing her to move, the family took turns sleeping at grandmother's house to look after her. Some nights it was Tom, and some nights it was somebody else. However, on the night that everything changed, it was Tom's younger brother's turn. That same day, Tom's father and mother had gone to a meeting in another province. So, basically, the two boys were the only ones at home. Tom was sleeping in the newer house, while his younger brother was staying with Grandma next door. Everything seemed normal at first, until it was in the middle of the night. Tom was asleep when he suddenly heard a loud banging on his bedroom door. His younger brother was outside, panicking, crying so hard that his words were almost impossible to understand. Brother Tom, Grandma's gone. Grandma's not breathing anymore." Tom woke up instantly. You could imagine the shock. One second he was asleep, the next second his little brother was telling him that their grandmother had just died. So Tom grabbed his phone, ready to call an ambulance, and he ran straight to Grandma's house. But the moment he entered, something made him stop. He heard Grandma's voice, and she was shouting, "I won't go! I still won't go! Please, let me stay a little longer!" That should have been impossible, because just a few moments earlier, his brother had been crying that Grandma wasn't breathing. Tom rushed into her room, and there she was. Grandma, good old poor old Grandma, was standing in the corner of the room, trembling violently. Her posture was strange, like she was not just scared, but terrified of something standing in front of her, something that Tom could not see. Then Grandma said something that stayed in Tom's mind for years. "Let me wait until it's finished first, and I'll do good deeds to make up for it." And right after that, she collapsed. Tom called the ambulance and told his brother that Grandma was still alive. She had not gone anywhere yet. Oh, talk about tough old lady. That night, they followed the ambulance to the hospital and stayed there to watch over her. But when the doctor examined her, the result was strange. There was nothing seriously wrong. In fact, the doctor had said that her health looked strong, maybe even better than during her previous checkups. By the morning, the doctor said that they could take her home. Before dawn, Tom's parents rushed back from their meeting. But once the whole family was together again, Tom's younger brother apologized. He thought that he had panicked too much. He thought that maybe he misunderstood Grandma's condition and assumed the worst. But Tom wasn't so sure, because he swore he could hear Grandma speaking to somebody or something that night. He saw her trembling in the corner, and he heard her bargain for something. At first, he wondered if he should tell everybody. Maybe they would think he was imagining things, and maybe it would only make the family more afraid. But at the same time, if something strange was happening, everybody needed to know. So Tom did what he thought was best. He told everybody about what happened. At first, his father didn't really believe it. But then Grandma came home, and that was when things became harder to dismiss. Guys, I know where this is going. Grandma made a deal with the devil, okay? So that's why she's alive now. She made a deal with the devil. She's gonna sell her soul. Before that night, Grandma was weak. She had many health problems. She could barely walk properly, and she needed help eating. And the family had nearly reached the point where they had to feed her only soft or liquid food. But after coming back from the hospital, she stepped out of the car and walked into the house by herself, calmly and normally, like nothing had ever happened. Her voice was clear now. There was no roughness, no dryness, and no weak elderly tremble. That morning, she came out and ate by herself like a healthy person. At first, the family was happy. Of course they were. Who wouldn't be? Someone that they loved had recovered suddenly. But later that same morning, Grandma vomited. Then she told Tom's mother something strange. That evening, she wanted to eat blood larb. Raw blood larb. Now, for some of you guys who don't know what larb is, it's like a Thai dish, and it's pretty delicious. You could eat it raw, like usually they use like beef and stuff like that, or pork and stuff like that. And you gotta cook it. You gotta prepare it correctly. Otherwise, obviously, you'll get sick or get parasites and stuff like that. But it's delicious, and you can also have it cooked. I prefer to have my larb cooked. It's delicious. It's like the perfect snack to eat when you're drunk. It's like a good drinking kind of dish or side dish. Anyways, that's what larb is. Now, that was not like Grandma at all. Normally, she would not even eat food that was slightly undercooked. Raw meat was completely out of character for her. But from that point on, Grandma only wanted raw food. If raw meat was available, she would eat it. If not, she would refuse food and only drink milk or eat fruit. The family was worried. Raw food was dangerous, especially for somebody her age. This old lady is 80 years old, she's eating raw food. But they also thought, she's already over 80. If eating what she wanted made her feel happy, and if she was suddenly stronger than before, then perhaps it was better not to fight her too hard. So they let it happen. And for a while, Grandma did indeed become stronger and stronger. One day, though, Grandma disappeared. The family panicked and started preparing to search for her, but before they could go far, the door opened. Grandma walked back in by herself. She was smiling. She was dressed completely in white, and she told them that she had walked to the temple. She had not gone there in a long time, and she wanted to get some exercise. But there was a problem with that explanation. The temple was almost 5 kilometers away, or 3 miles for you Americans. Actually, I'm American too, my bad. 3 miles for us Americans. For an elderly woman over 80, someone who had been weak and sick not long ago, walking there and back should have been almost impossible. And yet, she had done it. After that, walking to the temple became part of Grandma's daily routine. Every day, she would go back and forth. The family was amazed, confused, and happy all at once. It looked like a miracle. But miracles do not usually come with the smell of raw meat, or with dogs running away in terror. I'm just beginning to think that Grandma is just one tough old lady. Back in my day, we ate raw meat. Look at you kids on your iPads and tablets. Back in the day, we played with sticks and ate mud. Stuff like that. Anyways. A few months later, Tom's younger brother entered university and moved into a dormitory, so he did not come home as often. That meant that Tom became the one who regularly slept at Grandma's house to watch over her. That was when he started seeing things for himself. One night, Tom woke up and saw Grandma get out of bed. She walked straight to the refrigerator, opened the freezer compartment, and took out frozen pork. And then she ate it. Not wildly, not like some monster or animal in a movie, but calmly. She bit into it once or twice, like she was tasting something, and then put it back into the freezer as if nothing had ever happened. And that made it worse in a way, because it was not chaotic, it was deliberate. Other strange things started to happen too. Stray dogs and cats that wandered near the house would scatter the moment Grandma opened the door. Their tails would tuck under, and they would run away like they had seen something terrifying. During the daytime, Grandma liked to close the curtains, turn off the lights, and sit alone in the dark. Sometimes, Tom would secretly listen from outside the room, and he would hear her speaking, but not to anyone the family could see. In the second year after Grandma had quote-unquote come back, there was a night that fell on a major Buddhist holy day. Everybody came to sleep at Grandma's house that night, except Tom's younger brother, who was still at his dormitory, at the university. In the middle of the night, they heard a sound outside. It was like fingernails, long fingernails scraping across glass, scraping along the walls and moving around the house. Not just one set of hands, not two, but from the sound, it was like dozens of people were circling the house, dragging their nails against the walls as they moved. At the same time, dogs howled all through the alley. The family was terrified. Then Grandma suddenly sat up. Her eyes were closed and her hands were pressed together. She began chanting something under her breath. Then she opened her eyes. They were blood red. Everyone recoiled. Grandma stood up, walked to the refrigerator, took out pieces of pork and beef, and threw them outside the house. Then she picked up a fruit knife and walked around inside, scraping and slicing the walls. Tom's father asked her what she was doing, and Grandma only said, "Stay still. Do not be afraid." A little while later, the sounds outside disappeared. By morning, the meat Grandma had thrown outside was scattered everywhere, like something had fought over it. One night, while the family was sleeping, a loud crash came from the front of the house. Everyone ran outside and found two men with handguns who had crashed their motorcycle into an electric pole across from the house. Both men had broken necks and they were both dead. At first, it looked like a strange accident. Then Tom's father checked the security camera footage. The footage showed that the two men had been thieves. They climbed over the wall and broke into the house, but as soon as they got inside, both of them dropped to their knees. They pressed their palms together and they begged for their lives, not from the family, but from something inside the house. Then Grandma appeared in the footage. She walked toward them and took something like some sort of bomb, herbal bomb, and rubbed it onto their foreheads. After that, both thieves scrambled out in terror, climbed back over the wall, and ran to their motorcycle, and then crashed into the electric pole. It was impossible to explain normally, but by then, the family had already learned to live with impossible things. Tom's younger brother once said that whenever he hugged Grandma, her body smelled extremely foul. It wasn't like that before. In the past, Grandma used to smell like Thai-scented water or perfume, and now she just smelled rotten. Still, whatever Grandma had become, she seemed to protect the family. One day, Tom's younger brother was at the market, and he was about to get on a motorcycle taxi to return to his university. But just before he climbed on, he heard Grandma's voice calling from behind him. He turned, and because of that, he missed the ride. Instead, another passenger got on. Later, they found out that the motorcycle taxi had been attacked by a rival and shot. The driver was seriously injured. If Tom's brother had gotten on that motorcycle, he too might have been badly hurt, or maybe even worse. So even though Grandma, good old Grandma, 80 years old, was frightening, the family just could not see her as purely evil. She was strange and unnatural, but it was still Grandma. Or at least something in her still was. Over time, all of these things became a part of their daily life. It sounds strange, but people can almost get used to anything. The raw food, the dark room, the foul stench, and the scratching things outside during the Buddhist holy days. Grandma's sudden strength and her strange protection. Almost 4 years had passed, and Tom's younger brother was close to graduating from university. As that day approached, Grandma began to decline again. Her body became weak. She could no longer walk to the temple, and her smell became stronger, more rotten, and more difficult to ignore. She had to be fed again like before. The things that scratched outside the house started coming more often too. Before, they usually came only on Buddhist holy days. Now, they come so frequently that Tom's mother had to buy raw pork and leave it outside by the front gate every single day. It was like something was waiting, like the time Grandma had borrowed was almost over. Then came the day that Tom's younger brother completed his final university credits. The family helped move his belongings back from the dormitory. That same day, something strange happened. Grandma stood up and walked again, just like before. Strong, clear, and able to move normally. But this time, her words were different. She kept on saying strange things that sounded like final instructions, like she was quietly saying goodbye to everybody. Then, around the time Tom's younger brother was about to attend his graduation ceremony, Grandma spoke to Tom late one night. "I'm going to leave now," she told him. "I've postponed them for a long time, and they've been waiting for me for many days. Now, it really is time." Tom felt his heart sink. He asked her to tell him the truth, everything. And that was when Grandma finally explained what had happened on the night she stopped breathing. Grandma said that on that night she felt tightness in her chest. Then a tall old man appeared in the room. He was large, with red skin, no shirt, and he was just wearing traditional pants wrapped around his lower body. The whole room was filled with light. When he touched her, she felt herself floating away. She could not control where she was going. As she moved, images from her past flashed around her. Memories appeared one after another, depending on what she thought about. But then she saw one final image. Tom's younger brother graduating. That image made her regain consciousness, or something close to it. Then she found herself at a valley. There were countless people there, millions of them, standing in line before a huge wooden gate that reached up into the sky. At that moment, Grandma thought only of her family. Tom's father, Tom's mother, Tom, and especially his younger brother, who had not yet entered university at the time. Then somebody, dressed in all white, walked over, pointed at Grandma and said, "This one still has attachments." In the next instant, she woke up. The same red old man was standing at the foot of her bed. And that was when Grandma understood. She had died. Or at least, she should have died. So she begged, she negotiated, she promised that if she was allowed to stay a little longer, she would do good deeds and repay the karma later. After that, Grandma said that she knew she was no longer fully human. She had come back as something in between, half person and half ghost. The next morning, Tom's father told Tom and his mother to take the younger brother to the university for the graduation ceremony, and his father would instead stay behind to take care of Grandma. Before they left, Grandma hugged and kissed Tom's younger brother. The way she held him made it feel like she knew it would be the last time. After the graduation ceremony, Tom, his mother, and his younger brother went to rest at a hotel. But that evening, their father called. Grandma's condition had become serious. She had been taken to the hospital. Tom immediately drove his mother and brother back, and they arrived around dawn. His father told them that Grandma was gone. This time, truly gone. Tom's father said that around 3 in the morning, while he was watching over Grandma, he had a dream. In the dream, Grandma walked over and hugged him. She kissed him and told him that she loved him, his wife, and all her grandchildren very much, but she had to go now. She also told him to thank Tom's mother. "Thank her for me," Grandma said. "Thank her for taking such good care of you and your children all this time." Then Tom's father woke up, and when he opened his eyes, Grandma was sitting properly on the hospital bed with her palms pressed together, as if she was speaking to somebody that no one else could see. Then she slowly sat back down, and her pulse stopped. After everything was over, Tom thought back to the words that Grandma had said years earlier. "Let me wait until it's finished first." Now he understood what those words meant. She had been waiting for Tom's younger brother to graduate from university. In their family, no one had ever graduated from university before. Not on his father's side, not on his mother's side, not even Tom himself. Grandma had held on for that. When Tom later asked his parents about it, they admitted that they already knew Grandma would leave around that time. They just did not think it would happen so suddenly. They also explained why Grandma had gone to the temple so often after coming back. She had been making merit. She had helped build bathrooms for the temple and had done many other charitable acts. Tom's parents had also helped arrange merit-making in her name. Maybe she really was keeping her promise, and maybe she had been allowed to stay just long enough to see the one thing she could not let go of. She repaid her merit just so she could see her youngest grandchild graduate from university. This story is about me. Today, I am the owner of a construction contracting company. But back when I was still a teenager, I once worked as a laborer. Looking back on that time, my family was poor and I did not have many choices in life. I did not finish school, and if I wanted to farm, the fields were dry. If I wanted to do any other kinds of work, I did not have enough knowledge or skills. Then one day, I met a friend I had not seen in a long time, not since elementary school. That friend invited me to go work with him because one of his relatives happened to be looking for workers. The job was construction work. It paid daily wages, included an allowance, and even provided 3 free meals a day. When I heard that, I agreed and immediately followed my friend. During the first week, I stayed at the worksite. There was one thing that I noticed. Whenever the sun went down, everyone would hurry back to their own lodging. I understood it during that time as people being tired and wanting to sleep to regain their strength. Then, one day, before a major Buddhist holy day and a day off for the workers, the boss asked me to help buy things at the market so they could be used for cooking and making merit to the next day. It was around 5 in the evening after work, so I quickly rode an old bicycle that was parked there and followed the route the boss had told me. He stressed that I had to stay on the road and absolutely not leave the route. I was not allowed to wander anywhere unnecessarily. I had to hurry, buy the things, and come back immediately. On the way back, I had to return by the same road only. The path that I took during that time was a paved road, although it wasn't very smooth. On both sides, there were tall rubber trees stretching from the front of the dormitory all the way to the market. The road curved into a U-shape. The distance was about 4 to 5 kilometers, and if I had to use a motorcycle, it probably would not have been that difficult. By the time I reached the market, the sun was already beginning to set, and the air was getting cooler and cooler. I hurried to buy everything that the boss had ordered. The menu they were going to make was boat noodles, and the one thing that was necessary and absolutely could not be missing was fresh pork blood. After I finished buying everything, I quickly rode the bicycle back along the same route. The atmosphere that I had seen earlier had already turned completely dark, and I could barely see anything. The sun had gone down and there were no streetlights, and all that remained was a silent, lonely atmosphere. On top of that, back then, mobile phones were not yet popular and very expensive. All I could do was get off the bicycle, carry the things, and slowly walk while pushing the bike along. As I was pushing the bicycle, something surprised me. I came across a fork in the road. That was strange because when I had come earlier, this route had not any junctions at all. When I looked onto the side road, I saw that it was a dirt road. It was not very wide on either side. Looking as far as I could, I saw that the end of the road seemed to lead to a mountain, which was the same mountain behind the workers' camp. Even more strangely, the whole road had dim lights along the way. Although they were not very bright, they were enough for me to see the route. With the thoughts I had at that moment, together with the darkness and eerie atmosphere, I felt that if I went straight, I would have to return by the original road, which meant going another 4 to 5 kilometers around the long way. But if I turned into this shortcut, judging roughly by the eye, it should not have been more than 1 kilometer. Happy that I would not have to waste time taking the long way around, I quickly got back on the bicycle and rode into the shortcut immediately. When I thought back to the boss's words telling me to stay on the road and return only by the same way, I did feel a little strange, but I assumed that the boss had probably just been teasing me. Normally, he was kind and liked joking with his coworkers. Not long after that ended, I had only ridden a short distance when suddenly the sound of dogs howling miserably rang out from every direction. I began to get goosebumps. At that moment, I heard footsteps that sounded like a four-legged animal running up from behind me, getting closer and closer. I stopped the bicycle and turned around to look behind me. What I saw was the shadow of one dog with glowing red eyes. Its body was completely black, and it was standing about 100 meters away. The moment I turned to look at it, the dog stopped still. But the terrifying thing was not over. Those glowing red eyes increased from 1 pair to 2 pairs, and then to 3 pairs, until there were 7 pairs of red glowing eyes. I got off the bicycle and in the darkness searched for a stone. I threw it out with all of my strength, not really hoping to hit or injure anything, and it seemed to work. All 7 pairs of red eyes scattered and disappeared into different directions. I got back on the bicycle again and started riding away, but this time, the footsteps I had heard earlier suddenly rushed toward me before I could prepare myself. Within only a few seconds, the owner of that strange sound attacked me immediately. My bicycle fell and my belongings scattered all throughout the road, and the dogs let out one loud howl. As soon as I regained my senses, I hurried to collect things that had scattered across the ground and put them back into the cloth bag. But before I could gather everything, I saw those 7 dogs from earlier. Their bodies were not normal. Some had no legs. Some had short, stubby faces. Some had wounds all over their bodies. But the thing that almost shocked me the most was, at that moment, every single dog was huge. Looking carefully, their size was almost the same size as a large cow, and I immediately ran from that spot. At this time, it seemed like things only became worse. The large mountain I had seen at the end of the road had disappeared, leaving only darkness that seemed to have no end. Out of fear, I ran toward the darkness without thinking about my life. Eventually, I began to grow exhausted. Then, luck seemed to be on my side. I saw the light of a lantern shining from a hut. I hurried toward it to ask for help, and when I got closer, I saw about 5 villagers sitting in a circle, drinking alcohol with a raised platform under the light. When the villagers saw me running toward them in a panic, they all laughed loudly and happily. Because I thought I had definitely survived, I laughed along with them too. But before I could say anything, the villager, sitting farthest inside, whose skin was completely black and whose hair was white all over his head, stretched his arm out long through the middle of the drinking circle and reached straight toward my cloth bag. His face was twisted and distorted, and his eyes bulged out of their sockets. The other villagers laughed as well before sticking out their tongues, stretching them out so long that they reached the floor. I completely lost my senses and stumbled backward away from that place immediately. Then I tried to run again. Suddenly, I heard the sound of a motorcycle speeding up from behind me. It followed me and stopped in front of me. The person I saw was a teenage boy who, judging from his appearance, did not seem to be more than 20 years old. "Hey, brother, you're not from around here, are you?" His dry, hoarse voice made me startle. The moment he finished speaking, the head of that teenage boy slowly turned backward. That would not have been strange if his body had turned with it, but what I saw then was impossible. His head and body were facing in different directions. His body faced forward, but his head had turned back behind him. "Brother, I'm hungry. I'm very hungry." As soon as his voice ended, the motorcycle sped away quickly before crashing and sliding across the ground, sending sparks in a long trail. The body of the teenage boy flew into a rubber tree beside the road with full force. His head twisted until it was almost torn away from his body before he vanished into the darkness. By then, everything was becoming worse and worse. I thought I might not make it out of that place alive, and no matter where I looked, I could not see any road that would lead me out of it. If I continued forward, it was pitch black. If I went back, I did not know what else I would encounter. I forced myself to keep walking forward while trying to stay conscious, cursing as I went. If anyone or anything came to bother me again, I wished that it would never be reborn. I wished for it to become a demon, a wandering spirit trapped here forever. After I gritted my teeth and continued walking through the darkness for a while longer, I heard something that sounded like human footsteps following behind me. But at this time, I decided that I would not turn around to look again. I would close my eyes and keep walking. Any evil spirit that tried to harm me, I cursed it to remain trapped here for all of eternity. As I kept walking, the footsteps behind me increased more and more, from one pair to who knew how many dozens or hundreds of pairs. I did not know how much time had passed or how far I had walked when suddenly I felt the air around me become warmer. It also seemed as if there was a light. I forced myself to open my eyes, and what I saw was a wandering monk sitting under his umbrella tent in the middle of the road. Candlelight surrounded him, and there was a tray with sacred thread placed there. He was facing towards me. Come hide behind me," the monk said. I admit that, at that moment, I still hesitated over whether or not I should believe in him. But since I had no other choice at all, I stepped back over the candlelight and went to hide behind the monk. When I opened my eyes and looked back, I saw hundreds of black shadows standing piled behind one another. Some were shaped like humans. Some were shaped like strange animals that I could not identify. Some were dogs, some were cows and buffaloes, and others looked like they were birds. They filled the area until it seemed dark everywhere. The monk was holding some kind of knife and asked for the cloth bag I was carrying. When he received the bag, he took something out What I saw was the bag of pork blood that I had bought to make noodles. Then the monk chanted something before asking for the knife I was holding. He used it to cut open the mouth of the bag and immediately threw it toward the group of black shadows. What I saw was something beyond description. Hundreds of spirits swarmed and ate the pork blood that had splattered all over the ground, as if they had been starving for a very, very long time. At that moment, the monk told me to run to the large tree. After passing the tree, I would find a small wooden bridge. I had to hurry and cross it immediately and was not allowed to turn back until I crossed. I bowed down to the monk and quickly ran exactly as he told me. Behind me, the black shadows were still swarming and eating the blood excitedly. The moment I crossed the wooden bridge, I heard the voice of an old woman call out, "Boy, what are you doing there?" Instantly, everything around me changed. The sun was beginning to rise. Around me were rubber trees and tall grass that rose above my head, so thick that I could not continue walking. The villagers who saw me came to help. They had to bring knives to cut through the grass and carry me out from that place. When I looked back, there was no path and no road at all. There was only tall grass, rubber trees, and a very dense forest. All around my body were cuts from the grass. After that incident, at dawn, my boss and co-workers who had been waiting for me since that evening helped take me to the temple. When we arrived, we met an old monk. He lit up many incense sticks, though I cannot remember how many, and he handed them to me. He told me to go pay respects to the great teacher monk. The moment I went in, what I saw was a picture of the monk I had seen the night before, along with his ashes, bones, incense, and candles that had been set up for worship. It was considered my good fortune that he had mercy on me and came to help me in time. The old monk at that temple told me that the teacher monk was the former abbot of the temple, and he had passed away a long time ago. As for the things I encountered, they were likely the spirits of wandering ghosts and demons that had come to ask for merit, or perhaps they had smelled the raw blood that I was carrying. People in that area said that, in the past, that place had once been a cemetery. Because of that, when they built the road, they had to curve it around in a U-shape. Nowadays, every temple has a crematorium, so no one goes into the old cemetery anymore. As time passed, trees and grass grew over it, and eventually it turned into a forest. Those spirits there were probably hungry. After that, I immediately went back home and never returned to work at that place again. As for the bicycle, I later learned from my friend that the workers had found it deep inside the dense forest near the front of the market, many dozens of meters in. Even now, no one dares to take it out. This story happened at a certain house somewhere in the Isan region. My name is JD. I am a young man from a neighboring country who had come to Thailand to look for work. Because of poverty, my life did not have many choices. I had been an orphan since I was young. My mother left me when I was little, and my father had died a long time ago. I lived with my grandmother and grandfather ever since I was a child. I entered Thailand legally through an employment agency, along with my girlfriend. During the first 3 months, my girlfriend and I lived very difficult lives. We slept at the factory, where fermented and pickled foods were produced, located at the back of the market. That was also the same place where the both of us worked. One night, while I was sleeping on a concrete floor covered with a damp tarp inside the workers' sleeping area, I had a dream. In the dream, I was sleeping inside a house that was not very large. I was lying on a soft, comfortable bed with a blanket that had been washed until it smelled clean and fragrant. It was completely different from the tarp I was using as a blanket in real life. It was a feeling I had almost never experienced before in my life, but not long after that, I suddenly woke up because a large rat had run across my leg. The next night, while I was sleeping, I had the same kind of dream again, but this time, something strange had changed. As I was about to lie down in the dream, at the foot of the bed, there was a long-haired woman sitting on a dressing table, combing her hair. I kept having dreams like this often, and I regularly saw that woman in my dreams. Judging from her appearance and manner, she seemed to be a woman of a certain age, but she was still very young and beautiful looking. I began to wonder what exactly was going on, but I also had to admit that, even though it was a dream, I felt quite warm and happy whenever I was there. "Should we look for a house to rent?" I asked one day while we were working. I said this to two coworkers who were also from another neighboring country and to my girlfriend who was sitting nearby. "I don't think we can afford it. I still have to send money back home," one friend replied, while the others seemed to agree because they also had to send money back to their families. They talked about how this was a city area and that rent would be quite expensive. The rent money could probably be turned into many meals instead. "Then should we at least go walk around and look first? Tomorrow is a day off anyway. We can treat it as a rest. We've been working for months and have barely had any days off. If we keep going like this, we'll die before anything gets better." I tried to persuade them in a relaxed way. After listening to me, my friends gradually began to go along with the idea, and in the end, they agreed. The next morning, the four of us showered, got dressed, and came out to stand in front of the market. "So, which way should we go?" one friend asked me with a laugh. The truth was, we had almost never gone anywhere except to work and at the back of the market. "I don't know either. Let's just get on whatever bus comes by," I answered helplessly. None of us knew where to go either, so the four of us got into a public bus without knowing the destination. We agreed that we would ride it to the end of the line and looked at both sides of the road to see if there were any houses for rent that were not too far from the market that we worked. The bus had only been moving slowly for less than 5 minutes when the old vehicle began making loud noises and releasing black smoke without any consideration for the passengers or people passing by. Finally, the bus broke down. Many passengers had to get off and wait for the next bus that would come behind it. "Looks like luck isn't on our side today," one of my friends said to me. "Maybe not," I replied, pointing toward an alley directly in front of us. The alley looked strangely familiar, as if I had seen it from somewhere before. "Should we try going into this alley?" I suggested. The four of us walked into the quiet, deserted alley. After a while, my friends and my girlfriend began saying that there was probably not any houses in this area. But because I felt as if something was pulling me forward, I asked my friend to trust me just one more time and walk just a little bit farther. Suddenly, after we passed a large tree, it was as if luck had finally sided with the four of us. The scene in front of us was a single-story house with a "for rent" sign in front. The house was not very large. It was white, and although it looked old, it seemed very livable. But the thing that gave me goosebumps was that when I looked at it from the outside, the house looked far too much like the house in my dream. "It's probably expensive. I don't think we can afford it," one of my friends said. Let me try calling the owner first," I said. I took up my phone and called the number posted in front of the house. It seemed like fate was on our side again, as the seller answered my phone call and told me the price of the rent. The home was shockingly cheap. The whole house was only 1,200 baht per month. If it was divided among the four of us, it would only be about 300 baht each month. But the auntie gave us a warning. She told us that, if you live here, think good and do good. Bad people don't stay here for long. And one more thing, this is very important. Absolutely do not lock the back door. Since all of us were so happy, none of us really paid much attention to what she said. The following week, the four of us carried our few belongings into the new house. Inside the house, there were 2 bedrooms, so we divided them up with 2 people in each room. My 2 friends stayed in one room, and I stayed with my girlfriend in the other. As soon as I opened the door to the room my girlfriend and I had chosen, I could hardly believe my eyes. Inside the room, there was a bed and a dressing table. Both of them looked exactly like the images from my dream. They looked so similar that it could be called the very same room. I began to feel strange and wondered what exactly had led me to this place. Not long after we moved in, strange things began to happen. One night, while my girlfriend was sleeping in a half-awake, half-asleep state, she suddenly screamed loudly. She said she had seen a woman walk in from the back of the house, sit down in front of the mirror, then turn and point at her, telling her to pack her things and leave the house immediately. Since our lives were finally beginning to get better, I tried to comfort her and told her that it was nothing and that she was just probably tired. But not long after that, a similar incident happened again. This time, my girlfriend told me that she saw the woman staring at her from the window on the side facing the back of the house. The woman pointed at her with her hand while shouting curses and telling her to get out of the house. Many times when my girlfriend was lying down or doing something else, she would often catch sight of a woman out of the corner of her eye, sitting at the dressing table and combing her hair, making her panic again and again. Many times when she slept, my girlfriend also dreamed of that same woman walking in and out of the forest behind the house. Because I was beginning to have a headache from everything that was happening, I called the auntie who owned the house and asked whose dressing table and bed they were and whether I could return them to the owner. The auntie told me that they were old belongings left behind since the earliest tenants, probably more than 20 years ago. She told me not to remove them under any circumstances. She said to take good care of them, clean them properly, and then life would improve on its own. So I cleaned the room the way the auntie had advised. When I lifted the dressing table from its original position to clean the floor underneath, I found a large pile of hair gathered there. It was very long hair. My girlfriend's hair was not that long at all. Under the hair, I found a photograph. It was a couple's photograph that had been torn in half from the right side. The woman on the left side of the picture was wearing white clothing. She looked exactly like the woman I had seen in my dreams. The photograph was very old, so old that it had almost turned yellow. I decided to keep this matter a secret. That very night, something major happened. While I was sleeping beside my girlfriend, I dreamt that the woman in the photograph opened the door and came in from the back of the house. She walked over to wake me up and told me to go look beside the house immediately, while also telling me to prepare myself. Then it felt as if she kicked me hard enough to wake me up. I startled awake, and on the bed, I was lying there alone. My girlfriend was gone. Terrified that something bad might have happened to her, I grabbed a flashlight and walked out to the back of the house. But the sight I saw became something I never expected. My girlfriend was lying with one of my friends under a tree in the manner of secret lovers. I was shocked and devastated by what I saw. Both my girlfriend and my friend admitted that they had been secretly seeing each other and secretly having relations for some time already. But they said they had never come outside to do anything like this before, and they were also shocked because they did not know how they had ended up there. Behind the house was an overgrown forest with only a narrow path, and none of us knew where that path ended. Because my mental state was badly wounded the next day, I made a firm decision. I went to quit my job and traveled back to my home country. I did not say goodbye to my girlfriend or my remaining friends at all. During the time that I stayed back home, I often dreamt that the woman in the photograph came to pat my head and comfort me. Several months had passed. Because my mind was still restless, I returned to that house again. Since I arrived during the daytime, I sat waiting in front of the house. I had already decided that I would forgive the two of them, and I would apologize to the other friend, the one who had not been involved, because I had run away without telling him it had not helped pay the rent for that month. Around 9 at night, the friend who had not been involved came back alone. When I saw him, I teased him, saying, "You've been working hard until this late now?" The two of us greeted each other, and he told me that the other two were no longer there. Only he was living there by himself. When I asked him about what had happened, I learned that after I had gone back home, the two of them began suffering from severe hallucinations. They were haunted by ghosts almost every night. Some nights, they would go and stand and dance in the forest behind the house. Some days, they would fight with each other for no reason. In the end, neither of them could stay there anymore, and the both of them disappeared from the house without going to work. "Oh, and I didn't come back from work today," my friend told me. "I went to his cremation. The foundation handled it. He was hit by a car and passed away. You should forgive him now. But as for your girlfriend, or your ex-girlfriend, I have no idea where she is. I haven't heard anything from her either. At the end of this month, I'm also moving out as well. I can't afford to pay the house alone." My friend's answer left me almost in shock from what I had heard. That night, I asked to sleep inside the house with him. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, I heard a whisper beside my ear. "If you want to know the truth, walk to the back of the house. Just follow the path." The voice made me startle awake, sweat soaking from my body. I walked over and woke up my friend so that we could go search for the truth together. The two of us held a flashlight as we walked out into the forest behind the house. There was only a narrow path beneath the small tamarind trees, and we had no idea where the path would end. The two of us walked toward fearfully for about 300 meters before a rotten stench hit both of our noses hard. The smell made us stop in place. We shone our flashlights around, but we found nothing. So we continued walking until I tripped over something and fell. My friend shone his flashlight on it, and he nearly lost his mind and almost ran away. The thing I had tripped over was a human skeleton with no flesh on it, covered only by decaying white clothing. Before I could fully regain my senses, something rotten, wet, and yellowish began dripping down from above. When I shone my flashlight upward, I found that it was the body of the young woman who had once been my girlfriend. She had hung herself above us. After that, the matter became a legal case. I said that I didn't want to reveal too many details about the case, but in the end, the police concluded that the skeleton below had likely died many decades earlier. The cause of death was hanging. As for my ex-girlfriend, they also concluded that she also died by hanging as well. The two of them had the same kind of damage to the bones in their necks. Even more terrifying, they both used the same kind of rope. After the legal matters were finished, I traveled back to my home country again. Since the story had become so serious, I told my grandfather and grandmother everything about all the strange things that had happened to me while I was living in Thailand. Then I remembered that I still had the torn half of the photograph of the woman I had seen in my dreams. I brought it out to show my grandfather and grandmother as evidence. At that moment, my grandmother suddenly burst into tears until they streamed down her cheeks. At the same time, my grandfather got up and searched through a cabinet as if he was looking for something. When he handed it to me, what I saw gave me goosebumps while also making me feel both happiness and sadness at the same time. What my grandfather handed me was the other half of the photograph I had. It was a picture of my grandmother standing beside that same woman. My grandmother told me that on that day, my mother had argued violently with my grandfather and grandmother to the point that she ran away from home. She took with her the only photograph they had after tearing it in half. From that day onward, my mother never came back there again. It had already been more than 20 years. After that, I returned to Thailand once more. I asked the auntie who owned the house about the origin of everything that had happened. The auntie herself was still shocked by what had happened as well. She had never known before that there had been two people who had hung themselves behind the house. The auntie then told me the whole story. About 20 years earlier, the woman who was my mother had come to live in that house with a Thai boyfriend. Not long before my mother disappeared, she had gone to consult the auntie who owned the house about the boyfriend. My mother discovered that the man had already had a wife and children, and that he and his family loved each other very much. This made my mother extremely heartbroken, and after that, the auntie never saw my mother again. The boyfriend himself also assumed that my mother had probably run back to her own country. No one ever expected that she would be found again as a corpse in the forest behind the house. Today, I have opened a made-to-order food shop at that house and have managed to improve my status in life. In the end, I am now saving money to buy that house from the auntie, together with my daughter and my wife, who I met later on in my life. This story comes from a man who once served as a soldier along the northern border. And right away, he made one thing clear. He could not reveal his name, the name of his unit, all that information, because if you were to make the story public, even after all these years, some of these details could still cause problems if people were to find out. Regardless, what he could say was this. Back then, he was part of a border patrol unit. His job was to move through remote mountain routes, look for illegal crossings, and keep an eye on paths that were often used to move drugs across the border. It was dangerous work, but it was also routine. Basically, it was the kind of job where the men were trained to expect danger from people, not from something that they could not explain. And yet, on one ordinary patrol, something happened to him and 11 other soldiers that none of them have ever been able to forget. That day started like any normal patrol day. The team leader gathered 12 soldiers and prepared them to move out. They left the meeting point in front of the camp at around 4 in the evening, carrying their gear and following a route that they already knew well. The men called this route the Red Area. It was because it ran along the border and everyone in the unit understood why it had that name. It was a high-risk path, the kind of place where drug smugglers were known to pass through. So even though the soldiers had walked it before, no one treated it casually. The weather that evening was colder than usual. Winter was starting to creep in, and the sky darkened faster than expected. Before leaving, the team had received a report that there might be drug movement through the red area at night. Because of that, they were ordered to set up a temporary camp, make a fire, and wait in position to watch for anything suspicious. Their team leader chose a large tree as cover and told everyone to settle behind it. Like always, the men took turns keeping watch while the others rested. Everything felt normal at first. A quiet forest, cold air, a small fire, and soldiers waiting in the dark. But then, at around 1 in the morning, that all changed. While the soldier and one of his teammates were on guard duty, they heard something moving nearby. It sounded like footsteps. Not an animal moving through dry leaves, not the heavy movement of a group, but something walking on 2 legs. In a place like that, one wrong sound could mean smugglers, scouts, or even an ambush. So, the soldiers reacted the way they had been trained to react. The fire was put out, the men moved into position, and everyone prepared for whatever was coming. But as the footsteps came closer, something felt off. The sound did not match a group of armed men. It did not sound organized. It did not sound careful. It sounded like one person stumbling through the forest. Then, out of the darkness, the person appeared. It was a small boy. He came in half walking, half running, and then collapsed near the place where their campfire had been. From the way he looked, the soldiers guessed that he was probably from one of the ethnic minority groups in that area, not any ordinary local village child. His body was covered in bruises and fresh wounds. He looked like someone who had been beaten and had run through the forest to escape. The team leader tried to speak to him, but none of the men could understand his language. Even the soldiers, who knew several local dialects, could not understand what he was saying, but his body language was clear enough. He was scared, and he needed help. At least, that was what it looked like. The team had to make a decision. They were fully armed, and they knew the area was dangerous. The boy could have been a real victim, but he also could have been bait. In places like that, a trap does not always look like a trap. Sometimes it looks like someone asking for help. Still, they decided to follow him, but they did so very carefully. The team spread out, moved slowly, and stayed alert. They would follow, but they would not rush in blindly. At first, the boy led them deeper into the forest. Less than 5 minutes after they started walking, the atmosphere changed. The forest sounds faded away. The birds, the insects, and distant animal calls, all of it seemed to vanish. All they could hear were their own footsteps. And when they stopped walking, it was quiet enough to hear each other breathe. That kind of silence in a forest does not feel peaceful. It feels wrong. It feels like everything living has moved away from you. The boy kept walking faster and faster. The soldiers had to pick up their pace just to keep up with him. After about half an hour, the men checking the map started to get uneasy. If they kept going, there was a chance that they could cross the border without realizing it. There was also the danger of old landmines in the area. So, the team leader made the safest call he could. They would keep following, but only at a safe pace. If they lost the boy, then they lost him. The distance between the soldiers and the boy grew wider. Then, the boy stopped. He was waiting beside a stream. When the soldiers reached the stream, the map officer checked his map again. Except, there was a problem. According to the map, that stream did not exist. And that was not only the strange thing. On the opposite side of the stream, there was a small village. The team had never seen it before. It was not marked, it was not reported, and it was not supposed to be there. The boy did not wait for them to understand what was happening. He jumped into the stream, swam across, and ran straight into the village. And then he disappeared. The soldiers stood there, staring at what just happened. At first, they tried to explain it in a normal way. Maybe it was a small tribal village that had never been mapped properly. Perhaps it was too remote. Maybe nobody had reported it. In that kind of terrain, things like this could have gone missed. Not knowing what to do next, the team leader ordered them to cross carefully. The water was only a little above waist level, so they didn't have to swim like the boy had. They crossed one by one with the others covering them, and before long, all 12 soldiers were on the other side. By then, it was a little after 2 in the morning, and the village was silent. The soldiers did not walk straight in. At that hour, if people were really living there, a group of armed men entering openly could cause panic, so they moved around to the back and entered quietly. The village was small, and from what they could see, it had fewer than 20 houses. The buildings were mostly made out of wood and bamboo, the kind of homes that looked handmade and old. But as they observed the area, something became clear. There were no lights, no voices, no animals, not even a sign of anybody living there. It didn't feel like a sleeping village. It felt like an abandoned one. That raised another question. If the village was abandoned, where did that boy go? The team leader ordered them to secure the area and begin searching. The first house they entered was badly decayed. It was made from bamboo with a grass-thatched roof, and inside there were only old belongings that had been left behind. Nothing moved, nothing breathed, and there were no signs of life. At that point, they could have turned back. But since they had already come that far, the team leader decided that they should inspect a little bit more, maybe find some more evidence, and they could find out who that boy was, and perhaps they would understand why this village was hidden out here so far in the dark. Then they approached the second house, and that was when the smell reached them. As soon as they came close to the second house, a foul odor drifted into the air. It was the kind of smell that tells you something is dead before you ever see it. When they opened the door, the idea that this was just an ordinary abandoned village disappeared instantly. Inside, near a large wooden support pillar, a big nail had been driven into the wood. A rope was tied there, and hanging from that rope was the body of a young woman. Some of the soldiers could not stop themselves from vomiting. The woman was dressed in strange clothing, something that looked like traditional clothing from a local tribe, possibly handwoven. But her body was already badly decomposed. The lower half had rotted so severely that parts had fallen to the floor. Blood, pus, and the smell of decay filled the house. It was horrifying. And now, the situation had changed completely. This was no longer just a strange village. This was a crime scene, or something close to one. The team began to have a more serious search of the area, and that was when they found the warehouse. The next building was larger than the others. It looked like a storage structure, also made of wood, but wider and more solid than the small houses around it. The soldiers forced the door open. Inside, they found crates, not just a few of them, but a massive amount of them. The entire space, about 5 by 10 meters, were packed with illegal drugs. The crates were stacked high, almost 2 meters tall, ready to be moved and transported into the red area. In that moment, everything made sense, and also didn't make sense at the same time. Maybe the hidden village was being used as a storage point. Perhaps the dead woman had been connected to it, and the boy that they saw earlier was probably running from the people guarding it. But before they could figure out any of that, the team leader knew one thing for sure. They had to leave. If an armed group behind that warehouse came back, those 12 men could easily be outnumbered. And in terrain like that, in complete darkness like that, a firefight could become very deadly very quickly. Then the gunfire started. It happened in an instant. Gunshots exploded from the darkness. The sound was heavy, like military-grade weapons. A wave of bullets tore towards the soldiers. Luckily, they were already alert and prepared, so they managed to take cover. No one was hit in the first burst. When the firing stopped, the team began retreating according to procedure, trying to identify where the shots were coming from. But that was the problem. They could not see anyone. No muzzle flashes, no movement, and no figures in the dark. Only the sound of gunfire. Then the shooting started again. This time, the soldier felt it. A bullet struck him in the chest. At least that's what he believed it was. He fell hard. A burning pain spread throughout his body, starting from his chest and moving everywhere at once. His hearing disappeared and his limbs stopped responding. He couldn't move and he couldn't speak. And then, just like people say, images from his life flooded his mind. He understood what it felt like to die. Then his teammates rushed in. They dragged him away, slapped his face, and shouted for him to get up. And suddenly, it was like waking up from a dream. His strength returned all at once, like a machine being plugged back into power. The team pulled back into the forest and checked everyone. All 12 men were alive. No one had been shot. No one had any serious injuries. There were only small cuts and bruises from falling during the retreat. Even the old soldier checked his own chest, and there was no blood, no hole, no wound, nothing. From the outside, his body was completely normal. But he knew what he had felt. He had felt the bullet hit him. He had felt himself dying. So what was that? By then, it was probably around 3 in the morning. They tried to use the radio, but there was no signal. So the team decided to make their way back to the stream and return to their original patrol. But the stream was gone. No matter where they walked, they could not find it. The map officer checked the compass and he checked their positions. He tried to retrace their route, but nothing matched. Every direction that they went into seemed wrong. Every path seemed to curve back to the same place. It felt like the forest itself was trapping them. They walked in circles without understanding how, and the more they tried to correct their route, the more lost they became. Eventually, the team leader decided to stop. Moving around in the dark was too dangerous. If they crossed paths with the armed group again, they might not be as lucky the second time. So all 12 men sat down behind a large tree, fully armed, waiting for daylight. Nobody slept, and they all waited for the sun. When morning finally came, the first light spread through the trees, and what they saw in front of them made no sense. There, right in front of them, right ahead of them, was the fire pit from their original camp, the same place where they had stopped earlier that night, the same place that they had left before following the boy. Somehow, after crossing a stream that was not on the map, entering a hidden village, finding a body, discovering a warehouse full of drugs and getting shot at, and then retreating into the forest, getting lost, walking in circles, they somehow ended right back where they started. And they didn't understand it. But one thing they understood was that none of them wanted to stay there for another second. They immediately returned back to their camp. After the team reported what happened, the matter became serious. A hidden village full of narcotics was not something anybody could ignore. Their unit sent multiple teams to search the coordinates the map officer had marked. They searched again and again, but nothing. No village, no warehouse, no stream, and not even the same terrain. Even the original team tried to go back later and find the place themselves, but they never found it again. Not once. The stream that they had crossed vanished as if it had never existed. To outsiders, the story started sounding exaggerated. Some people thought that the soldiers must have been confused in the dark, and others thought that they had misread the terrain. Some probably thought the entire thing was just a campfire story that grew over time. But for the 12 men who were there, it was not a story. It was something that they lived through. Decades have passed since that night, and whenever the members of that team meet again, they still talk about it. They all still argue about what happened. They try to make sense of the boy, the stream, the abandoned village, the dead woman hanging in that house, and all the things they encountered that night. As for the soldier who told the story, there's one detail that never really went fully away. His chest still hurts sometimes. There's no scar, no wound, no medical explanation, and at one point the pain bothered him so much that he went to a doctor and had to get an x-ray done. But they found nothing. However, he still remembers that burning feeling. He remembers falling. He remembers thinking in that final moment that he was about to die. And to this day, he still does not know whether that village was real, whether it was some kind of trap, or if they had crossed into a place that should not exist. All he knows was that 12 soldiers went into the forest that night, and all of them came back, but none of them came back with an answer. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. And if you haven't already, YouTube's telling me that you might like this video on screen, so check it out. Also, click that subscribe button as it's free and it gives me a rush of dopamine. Thanks for watching.